Do you remember, there was a time when every town had a market stall or a marketplace, mainly outdoor, and in many of our living memories, market day was always the busiest day of the week. Sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, people would flock to their town centres just to visit those market stalls, to grab a bargain, and much, much more. So what happened? Why are we not seeing decent market days these days? Have you got a town with stores that are unused or just 2 or 3 traders? Or even indoor markets that have gone for good? Now, why has this happened? How have we lost so many traders that we grew up and got to know very well? Or those that we avoided? Well, let's dive into those wonderful places that had everything and how they filled our town and village squares. Markets have been around for centuries. We had cattle markets, fish markets, meat markets that some of us can personally remember. But today we're going back to our favourite era, the 1970s in the UK, and taking a look at marketplaces, a look into the history of our local markets and where they have gone and why. Remembering back of a Saturday, going into town, and you knew it was going to be busy. Let's say it's 1972. And it's exciting for kids. We're looking at toy stores that are selling cheaper plastic toys, such as a mock Action Man that was, let's say, more breakable, or a mock Cindy doll where the legs are going to drop off in 5 minutes flat. But for us poorer kids, it didn't matter. We were happy to be treated to a toy or a game, and we still felt spoilt. You'd have to hold on to your parents' hand in order to not get lost in the crowds of people bustling and queuing to get served. As kids, it was quite claustrophobic in some ways, but always exciting. There was a choice of so many towns to go to, having market days. You would choose where you were going because that particular town had a busy market on that day. We knew the familiar stallholders. They knew us by name, and some would keep their items for you. You know, that specific second-hand collectible item that you'd mentioned that you were looking for. This was the era where searching for an item that you wanted could take an age, as we weren't searching the web and trying to find it that way and seeing it within a minute and then getting posted to us within 2 working days. It was the time when you got, let's say, that rare record, that rare comic that you had been looking for and asking for ages. You got it, and it was sheer victory. And that was the big thing, finally coming across an item and feeling great when you finally had it there in front of your face. The fruit and vegetable stores, all fresh and displayed, without packaging, just loose. You could choose that perfect cabbage or that fresh fruit for yourself, and you'd hear them from miles, these people. Get your bananas, get your apples, all shouting away about their wares. They'd weigh up all your items and put them in paper bags, no charge for the carrier bag. You could buy as much or as little as you needed. Now we see fruit and vegetables on farmers' markets or organic stalls that always command a higher price. We didn't care about funny-shaped carrots or misshaped potatoes. It just didn't bother us. We used to buy those large 56-pound bags of potatoes. They used to last for ages. But sometimes when you put your hand in, you might get one of those soft, gooey ones. Do you remember that? Ugh. But it was economy. Market traders, we never knew their names, but they knew ours. We just called him the fruit man or the pet food lady or the dodgy radio bloke. Always said your radio's working. I tried it earlier. It only needs a battery. And you get it home and more or less chuck it in the bin, in case of having an argument if you try to take it back to him. But they were there every week, shouting out their wares, as I said. It all added to that fast-paced yet exciting atmosphere of all that trading. The broken biscuit stores and the sweet stores, where they were all misshaped, smelt like an old-fashioned sweet shop. We didn't care if they weren't perfect, or the packaging that came with any of this smart artwork that clearly came with a larger price tag anyway. We knew it was cheap and we could afford to buy enough to go around the whole family. You could have as few or as many as you like, or what was in your affordability. Pink chocolate mice or shrimps. Never tasted like shrimps, thank God. Candy lollipops or rum and raisin fudge, all thrown into the same paper bag. But there was much more than that. There were clothes stores, either new or second-hand. Yes, back then that's what we called them, second-hand. Not vintage, not retro, not collectible. They were just simply second-hand. As kids, though, it was a dread, it was awful, because if we were bought that awful jumper or those awful pair of shoes that we hated, we'd find a place to hide them, maybe under the bed, and hope to God they'd never resurface again. Well, at least until we grew out of them anyway. And on the subject of second-hand stores, there were the reasons why very much didn't match in our house. A teapot which never matched the cups, or an old picture that really didn't stand out over that flowery wallpaper in the living room. But it was a bargain, and it had to be bought, even though it had a cheap plastic frame. Some of those pictures are quite collectible today. There were records on every second-hand stall too, boxes them to plough through, and nothing better did my parents love than searching through those bargain boxes that laid on the ground in front of the stores. They were cheap, but they were cheap for a reason. They'd already had to sort out these stallholders, but we always thought that we'd find a gem in them. We never did. Now, indoor markets were aplenty in the 1970s. Some are around today, but alas, we see pictures of empty stores all closed up, few traders struggling to get trade, especially in the precincts, or whether many of the shops around have been closed down anyway. They've spent money on them, but they just can't get them off the ground. Because of the competition, I suppose, but we'll talk about that later on in the video. But in their heydays, they were packed. They were open 3 or 4 times a week, with cafes, busy, smelling of bacon and serving hot tea in real mugs that were never a set. They never matched. If you bought 3 mugs of tea, those mugs would always be completely different, with cutlery of all different sizes. The same people, each time you visited, at the same tables, passing the time of day and chatting to strangers who had to share a table because they were so busy. There was no table service, there was no table menus. It was just what was written behind the wall on the counter, and everything was fried. And when your order was ready, you got shouted at. But we loved them. Other stores selling materials in an age where people were still making or repairing their own clothes, selling buttons, zips, knitting needles, wool and patterns. Hobbies were different in those days. They were more manual, more dexterous with people's fingers. I wonder how many people can actually knit or crochet today in comparison to years gone by. Was anyone lucky enough to have those large markets that sold practically everything at cheaper prices? Did you care about the packaging or labels, even though there was pushing and shoving and your tired feet waiting for the bus to go home? To us, it was a great day out. So guys, what do you think happened, eh? Who do we blame? Do we blame the supermarkets for taking over and having everything that's possibly for sale all under one roof? You name it, it's in there. Or do we blame the councils charging higher rents? Well, that certainly ain't going to help. Or the chain discount stores that buy so much in bulk these days, you simply cannot compete. Or have we just simply changed our shopping habits? Second-hand stores competing with charity shops as well, and those preferring to sell online. The magic of our market towns have certainly gone. I'm hoping there are still some around where you live. Near where I live, there's a market called Bilston Market, and it's very, very busy. But it's the only one in the Black Country that still works out of at least 9, 10 or even 11 of them. And talking about second-hand, just wanted to add this. We used to plough through those second-hand shops back in the 70s. They were everywhere. They're not there anymore, are they? Because of the charity shops, perhaps? Because people buy online more? I don't know. But we used to buy and sell at them. In fact, we made money out of them. And they helped us survive. Tune in next time to Mickey Babington's channel. No, that was a bit, no. Let's just say it differently. Thank you again so much for watching. You're lovely people, and I really don't deserve your kindness, but I'm very grateful of it. Thank you.